African proverb says, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel the warmth." What time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire?
Wife was a senior staff for a local science fiction convention. Not only was she an unpaid volunteer, she had to take a vacation day off work and pay for her hotel room and parking. On the morning that the convention started, she was setting up the first of the 3 rooms she was responsible for: manual labor, moving tables, setting up shelves and loading them with stuff, and somebody came in, took her ID badge off her desk, and brought it to the convention's lost and found. Convention LF lady told wife that lost badges have a $5 fee to get them back. Wife looked at the badge, looked at her, and said, "Keep it. I'm going home. Have a nice convention." Wife was about 25 feet down the hall when LF lady caught up to her and returned her badge. I had a co-worker at a non-commission-based retail job where a co-worker would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit apps and a high GSP, average HR sales. She would overhear my pitch for cards required and then lie to the customer so they would apply. I would have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things, and I reported her multiple times, as did my co-workers and customers. Now, one time I got lucky and an 18-year-old kid came and yelled by the most expensive desktop we have on display. $2.5K, she saw me do the sale. But I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount, but my radio was dead. Co-worker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the manager. She stone cold ignores me. I go for the manager. She prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to him. When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale BC she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer, he was mortified. I was literally told by my boss, ignore when she does that. She's a middle child, so she does stuff like that. I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I filed an HR complaint regarding her, and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. They all got reamed for it. Only one is still in a management position. The rest were eventually demoted or laid off. I was raised in a cult. There were 11 kids, with 4 moms, and the leader had really convinced our moms that he was the Archangel Michael. I tried to run away over and over in my late teenage years, hiking across the desert in the dark to get to the highway, where I would try to hitch a ride. Every single time, well-intentioned truckers called the police to report a little girl walking along the highway with her thumb out. I am short, and I had been malnourished my entire childhood. So even after I turned 18, I was underdeveloped and couldn't convince anyone I was an adult. Michael always called me in as a runaway, and the cops would take me back. The last time I was 20, and I felt so hopeless when I saw the police lights. I thought very seriously about trying to attack the officer with my knife, that I always brought in case I was picked up by a crazy person. I knew I was too small and weak to actually hurt the officer, but he would be obliged to arrest me and send me to jail. It was the only way out I could think of. Dumped at the doorstep of a youth shelter after my mom was hospitalized and dad was in prison. I wasn't a super bright teenager, but had enough sense to spend my last $20 on pepper spray and padlocks for my stuff. Predictably, people's stuff went missing all the time. I could write an essay on the issues in the public welfare system, ranging from the macro level, lack of funding, to the micro level, incompetent or burnout staff. There was violence, substance use, and sexual assault in crisis accommodation. But what bothers me 10 years later is the sheer stupidity of some adults who are meant to guide at-risk teenagers. I would ask my social worker questions like, are there places which can help me with food this week? How do I write a resume? And that social worker would vaguely shrug and offer relaxation techniques and mindfulness strategies. Look, 3 people got arrested at the shelter last week. No amount of relaxation techniques are going to calm me down. I'm guilty of doing stupid and irresponsible things as a teenager, but eventually finished high school and then 3 university degrees. I actually work for the same system that I was and am disappointed in, and there are so many practical resources available. They're underutilized because staff don't even know they're out there. If I had just a single adult to help me with the most simple tasks as a kid, it would have been so much easier. When you're a kid, you just don't know how university loan applications, taxes, budgeting, etc. works. Or at least I didn't. And everybody assumes that you do, because they do. Like, I had no idea that in my country, the Department of Housing can pay for your rental bond. I stayed in a homeless shelter for an extra 1 to 2 months to save up $900 to pay for the bond of a shitty apartment. Extra months of broken sleep. Men trying to pick the lock to my door. Residents hyped up on ice. Last year, there was a 16-year-old girl on the train, having a meltdown and making a public scene. She was clearly drunk, and people were avoiding her. She started screaming that she missed her period, and does anybody want to pay for her termination? She phrased it as a joke or a way to get money, which I did not give. But I guess she repeated it enough that I wondered if it was true. We got to talking, and I referred her to a social service, downloaded a list of resources in her catchment area, and saved links and forms on her phone about how to arrange her own healthcare cards since she's over 15, so that she can visit a bulk billing GP on her own and get tested. In my country, the pee test from a pharmacy is about $15, but a pregnancy blood test ordered by your GP is free. We discussed different options that her GP might outline and other things that might be helpful. I know as well as anyone else that it's not always that straightforward, especially with 30 patients in your caseload and juggling them with a million other priorities. But in the biopsychosocial framework of health, where biological, psychological, and social factors are proposed to impact physical and mental health, we severely underestimate the impact of social circumstances. We let these kids down all the time, and it's preventable. When I was a kid, my dad used to beat on me pretty often. When he was sober, I usually did something to deserve it. When he wasn't, it was just go time. One night, I was 14. He got drunk, and when I got home from a girlfriend's place, he cornered me and put a revolver to my head. He told me how worthless I was, and that he would be doing me a favor by killing me. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just waited for him to pull the trigger. He didn't. He left my room and left the revolver on my dresser as he walked out. I took the revolver and went out. I walked around my hometown, sat by the river, and thought about all the ways I could get back at him for all the misery he caused my mother, sister, and I. I also considered doing the old Kurt Cobain, but that's not relevant. I took the weapon apart and threw its pieces in the river. No one's asked me about the gun since. It's probably still there. When I had been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids/groups of kids, and the school showed so little interest in helping me. I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of the other kids, and not an eye was batted. When I finally took my mom's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE, and while we were all sitting in lines at the start of class, a kid in the line next to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment. Then when he kept going, I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring. I wanted them to. I wanted them to see that this average-height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me, a very small and disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. Kid told him they were only pebbles. He wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again, I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child, they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying, and if it gets pointed out to them, they think that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and suicidal because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. I didn't grow up with the best family. There was a long period of time where there was constant fighting, and things often went too far. I didn't feel safe in many different ways. It all culminated to a point when I was 17, disowned, and about to get kicked out. But my vindictive, defensive actions in the past made my mother know that kicking me out wasn't a good idea. I know the only reason I could have a roof over my head was because my mom isn't a citizen, and she knew I would have reported her for the crime of child abuse, which did happen, which would have put her residency in jeopardy. So, I guess I had to threaten to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. Edit. A lot of people are assuming my mother is illegal, but she's not. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism through which she can stay in the United States, but she married my dad, American, and they got divorced. She can live and work here, but she doesn't have the full protection of the government like me. People shared their memories of the loneliness and exclusion they felt in life. All right, and you? What does this saying remind you of? Share your thoughts with us in the comments.